Блинцы, блинчики, блины, как колеса у весны.
Вау-вау-ва, цики-цики-цики-цы, русские блины.
Hi guys, happy Maslenitsa, and today I want to show you how to make Russian blinis, which is also known as crepes. And I'm gonna make them 4 different ways. I'm gonna make traditional ones, a buttermilk ones, and I'm gonna show you recipe for 2 gluten-free blinis, which is an oatmeal blinis using the oatmeal flour, and the most precious jewel of blinis is a buckwheat blinis using the buckwheat flour. And Maslenitsa is the holiday that's usually celebrated a week before the Great Lent and also 8 weeks before Easter. And it's also known as the holiday of sun, which makes sense, right? Because blinis look like little suns. For traditional blinis, we're gonna need 350 milliliters of milk, 130 grams of flour, 2 eggs, 1 tablespoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, 60 milliliters of oil, and 1 packet of vanilla sugar. In a mixing bowl, we're going to start with 2 eggs, and we're going to whisk them slightly. To the egg mixture, we're going to add our milk, and it's better if it's on the warmer side. So just pop it in the microwave for 30 seconds or so. Then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar, a half a teaspoon of salt, and I'm also adding the vanilla sugar, but you can add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then we're gonna sift our flour through, and it's better if you sift in your flour just to prevent any clumps in the batter. And then at the last moment, just add your 60 milliliters of oil, and our batter for traditional blinis is ready. As you can see, it's pretty thin. And before we start making our blinis, let me introduce you to a little secret of mine. We're gonna cut the potato in half and then just put the fork through it, add a little bit of oil in a little dish, and we got ourselves an oil baster. And of course, to make good blinis, you're gonna need a crepe pan. And it's a really shallow pan, so we're gonna use our potato baster to put some oil on, and our first blin goes on. And there is a saying in Russia, first blin never comes out good, but as you can see, mine seems to be doing good. There is a way to flip this, guys. As you can see, it forms this little edge on the side, and then so you can actually grab it by this edge and flip it over, so it comes out perfectly. Let me show you again. Do you see this little edge that's sticking out? It's cool to the touch, so you just can grab it, buy it, and flip it on the other side. It's really easy, guys. Our traditional blinis are ready, and as you can see, it has a very pretty pattern, and they're very pliable, so you could stuff them, you could roll them, you could just simply enjoy them with the sour cream and jam. Moving on to our buttermilk blinis. And this recipe is pretty simple. You just need a cup of each. 1 cup of buttermilk, 1 cup of hot water, 1 cup of flour, 2 eggs. You're gonna need a half a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, and a tablespoon of sugar. In the mixing bowl, we're gonna start with 2 eggs. I'm just gonna whisk them slightly, and to the egg mixture, we're going to add our buttermilk. And my cups are a little bit bigger, so it's like a coffee mug, so I think it's measures as a cup and a half of buttermilk, but you can use any cup size you want. So we're gonna add our sugar, which is a tablespoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, and to tone down the sourness in the buttermilk, we're gonna add half a teaspoon of baking soda. Then we're gonna add our flour, and always sift your flour through for blinis, just to prevent little clumps in the batter. When our batter is nice and smooth, we're gonna slowly start adding our hot water, and I mean it's like boiling water. It has to be really, really hot, so just add it slowly. Just slowly introduce the water to the batter, and then you're gonna add as much water as you can see. When the consistency for this batter is gonna be like a crepe batter consistency. I don't know how to describe it, but it's really thin, like that. And using our handy dandy potato baster, we're gonna put some oil on the pan and we're gonna pour our mixture in. As you can see, these crepes have so many little holes. It's because of the buttermilk. And once again, we need to find that little outer edge that's cool to the touch, grab by it and flip it over. And you see the pattern is a little bit different from the first ones. Hey guys, did you know I was making these blinis on Thursday? And Thursday is when you're supposed to go to your mother's-in-law house for blinis, and then next day she comes over to you. Let's look at the buttermilk blinis. As you can see, the pattern is a little bit different. They're much softer and much more pliable, have little holes. Those are probably my favorite ones. Moving on to oatmeal blinis, and you're gonna need 150 grams of oat flour, 350 milliliters of cold milk, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 60 milliliters of oil, half a teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 2 eggs, and 1 packet of vanilla sugar. In the mixing bowl, add 2 eggs, and we're gonna whisk them slightly. To the egg mixture, we're going to add 350 milliliters, which is a cup and a half of cold milk. And the reason we're using cold milk, not warm milk, because you guys know what happens when you add warm milk to oatmeal. Oatmeal expands, and we don't want this flour to expand. So we're gonna add our sugar and salt and the baking powder. For flavor, we're going to add 1 packet of vanilla sugar, or you can add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Sift your flour into the egg and milk mixture, and I'm adding about 150 grams of oat flour. And if you can see that your batter is still too thin, you can add a little bit more. And then add your oil, and our batter is ready. Let's make our oatmeal blinis. And it's the same technique, same flipping process. And there's a saying, if there is flour out there, you can make blin out of it. So you can pretty much make blin out of any flour. Our oatmeal blinis are ready, and you can see beautiful pattern, nice flexibility. You can stuff them, you can roll them, you can just enjoy them the way they are. Moving on to buckwheat blinis, and we're going to need 150 grams of buckwheat flour, 50 milliliters of warm milk, 1 teaspoon of dry yeast, 1 tablespoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, 100 grams of sour cream, 1 tablespoon of butter, 1 egg, and 150 milliliters of hot milk. First, we need to wake up the yeast. So in the 50 milliliters of warm milk, we're going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar and 1 teaspoon of dry yeast and set it aside for 2 minutes. In the mixing bowl, we're going to add our milk and yeast mixture. To that, we're going to add 100 grams of sour cream, and we're going to sift our flour through. What we're making now, actually, we're making a starter. So these blinis are kind of complicated to make, but since the buckwheat doesn't have any gluten in it, so we have to use the active dry yeast to make these blinis a little bit more pliable. So we're gonna set this starter to rise for about an hour. After 1 hour of proofing, your starter should double in size. And then what we're gonna do now, we're gonna add hot milk to it. Just add maybe 1/4 of a cup at first, so we can add our egg. Then just add your egg, mix it in, add 1 tablespoon of melted butter, that's for flavoring. Add your salt, since we already have sugar in the starter, and keep adding the milk to the right consistency of the batter. Okay guys, from so many uses, our potato baster is probably looking good enough to eat. So just pour your batter in, and if there are little holes, just you could patch them, just pour a little bit more batter. As you can see, this dough, because of the yeast in it, has so many holes. And once again, find that little edge and then flip it over. Our buckwheat blinis are ready, and they're a little bit more fragile, as you can see, because there's no gluten, but still you could roll them, stuff them, do whatever you want. So here you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. It took me 5 hours to film it, but it was worth it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you soon.